From the dreamlike shores of Spiritfarer to the arcade battlefields of Thronefall, I've tackled every achievement they can muster. But do I think it was worth it? Join me as I cut straight to the last couple achievements for each game and find out whether it's worth spending your hard-earned money on completing them too. We've got heartfelt goodbyes and Cthulhu riding tyrants ahead, so get comfy and let's dive on in. The mythological ferryman of the underworld, Charon, has decided to move on and has entrusted Stella as the new Spiritfarer. As keeper of the Everlight, Stella is tasked with guardianship of the many wayward souls seeking the afterlife, and sets about creating a much more homely and impressive vessel than Charon ever envisioned. Accompanied by her ever-loving pet cat Daffodil, Stella acts as captain, steering from island to island, catering to her passengers' every whim and fancy, before ultimately fulfilling their final wishes to prepare them for safe passage through the Everdoor. First and foremost, the wondrous limbo setting of Spiritfarer is a joy to lose oneself in, with an art style comparable to the works of Studio Ghibli, complete with an oversized ramshackle boat that could have been pulled straight from Howl's Moving Castle. In less capable hands, the airy soundtrack dancing between piano and string could have easily lost itself in attempting too often at unearned tear-jerking, but here the composer and sound designers know exactly the right moments to dial up the emotion before withdrawing again. While the otherworldly seascapes the player navigates are fantastical in nature, amplified by a dazzling use of lighting to enrich these 2D canvases, Spiritfarer is masterfully interwoven with metaphor and allegory to the real world. As the player's journey alongside each character progresses, it is impossible not to draw from similar personal experiences of ones we have lost along the way. These characters are bursting with individuality thanks to evocative animations, and so brilliantly written when offering fresh perspectives on how people deal with illness, disability, age, regret, and ultimately death. Yes, this is a game about death. If grief has recently wounded, Spiritfarer may be overwhelming at times, but only because the game approaches its subject matter with such maturity and sensitivity on a subject which is inherently difficult to teach about and learn from. As you help guide each character to their final moments, gameplay centers around helping them reach a certain level of satisfaction. That can involve building a comfortable living space aboard the ship for them, cooking meals to satisfy their personal tastes, or just listening as they pass on their worldly wisdom of the lives they led. Spiritfarer therefore takes the shape of a management simulator, collecting various resources from the scattered archipelago and juggling time management minigames to process said resources into increasingly complex byproducts. While this provides a nice gentle rhythm to occupy the player while they contemplate the emotional weight of its story, I did find these loops were becoming a tad monotonous before the game had finished. For me personally, I think the developers at Thunder Lotus Games could have afforded to condense the game a tad so that player interest doesn't trail off before the very end, because even in its dying moments, Spiritfarer has a few heartfelt surprises left to give. This is a real treasure from the indie gaming scene. Now, there are 3 main achievements which nicely categorise the 3 types of activities you'll need to be doing to hit 100%, and also to bundle together the 3 types of issues I have when I was completing Spiritfarer. They are Collector, Loose Lips and Sealed Lips, and the Happy Dance. So, first, let's look at Collector. To get this, you'll need to complete every set of items in the game before handing them in at Susan's museum. That means all the figurines, fish, gems, metals, and dishes. So, as you're playing through Spiritfarer, you'll need to make a conscious effort to constantly be crafting new items and hunting down rarer instances of each category. This is mostly fine, as it integrates quite well with the unfolding narrative and quest lines peppered throughout the game. However, there are over 100 different dishes to cook, which is far more than any other category of items, which quickly transforms from a laid-back experimentation into a tedious, methodical mixing of ingredients to exhaust every possible combination. I'll link to the wiki page for the full list that you'll almost definitely have to be turning to here in order to most efficiently crank through all these recipes. But overall, including this many unique dishes was way more excessive than it needed to be, both from a gameplay and achievement perspective. The next difficult achievement is Loose Lips or Sealed Lips. It depends really, because at face value, they aren't actually hard to do. The problem is that each of these two achievements is tied to a binary choice for a specific quest line. So, unless you knew ahead of time that you needed to save your progress just before you make this choice, you've locked yourself out of getting one of these achievements on your current playthrough. The quest in question is the one between Astrid and Giovanni. There is a point where Astrid asks you if Giovanni has been doing anything behind her back, and you can choose to either spill the beans and let her know that you've spotted him on another island, or you can hold it back and not tell her. Each of those two choices is tied to one of the two achievements. This is the only time in the whole achievement list that this happens, and it makes no sense whatsoever why this quest had these achievements tied to it. Putting completionists on high alert for this type of achievement is immersion breaking, as rather than soaking up the vibe the developers have carefully created, we instead have to make a mental note of when to watch out for the point where this choice occurs, so that we don't have to waste our time later. If you do miss out on getting either of these achievements, I've put a link in the description which gives instructions on how to manually import a save file so that you can redo the quest and make the other choice, which, believe me, is far less time consuming than starting a fresh save from scratch. And then last of all, we have the Happy Dance, which is awarded once you've had every spirit reach an ecstatic mood. The conditions for reaching ecstasy for each spirit is slightly different, but broadly speaking, you'll need to feed them their favourite meals, fully improve their living quarters, and regularly hug them in order to hit the highest level of happiness. The problem is, the game has no in-game tracking for which spirits you've done this with, so you'll have to be making notes of this as you go along. Whatever you do, before going to the Everdor with someone, ensure that you've made them ecstatic, because once they've gone, they are gone for good. This achievement is further complicated by Elena, who is far more difficult to make ecstatic than other spirits, because you cannot hug her, nor can you improve her living quarters without decreasing her happiness instead. Rather, the best way to increase her happiness is by having other spirits on board your vessel that perform music, as well as giving her her favourite meal, which is a green salad. Since Elena is a DLC character, it's quite easy by way of the game's structure to have already waved farewell to all the other spirits that perform music by the time Elena even appears on your boat. So this is another achievement which you can soft lock yourself from being able to complete, hence why it has the lowest percentage of players that have done it at a measly 4.6% at time of recording. Spiritfarer has robbed itself of its laid-back aesthetic by instead forcing players to optimise certain aspects to prevent skipping achievements or wasting time after what is a fairly lengthy game given its repetitive nature. Separately, these achievements may have been less egregious, but when bundled together it shows a real lack of intent from the developers when respecting the player's time. So I'm dropping Spiritfarer down to a disappointing 3.5 out of 5 for completion. Ruin has come to these lands. The fields weep with the blood of innocents spilled by an unjust king's insatiable lust for power. Monsters and mercenaries tear through every corner of the realm unchecked, leaving naught but burnt crops and scattered homesteads in their wake. There is but one hope, a sole surviving descendant of the royal bloodline having somehow survived a most wretched coup. Reclaim your birthright. Usurp the false monarch. Bring about Thronefall. Leeds-based developer Grizzly Games set themselves the goal of making a game that could squeeze into the demanding schedules of everyday life. Condensing a strategic game of building up and defending your medieval base against waves of enemies into a tight 20-minute experience is no mean feat, but it's pats on the backs all round as the team has thoroughly succeeded in doing so. Essentially, those who've enjoyed building up bases in titles such as Age of Empires or Civilization, but not so much micromanaging units to destroy the enemy's base, will feel personally catered to. Every tiny sliver of fat has been trimmed off wherever possible to ensure an experience as approachable and intuitive as possible, even for the uninitiated. Sharp art direction and striking colour palettes are working overtime to reduce the level of visual clutter, so only the most pressing information is presented to the player. This ensures that once the hordes descend, the player can react accordingly with responsive movement and orders. The controls are so stripped down you can even play one-handed, and no, that's not me showing off, you really can just play this one-handed. What isn't lacking, however, is the impressive variety of enemies sprinkled throughout the 10 main stages of the campaign. The player is equipped with a simple but effective arsenal to combat these foes, whether that's in the character's loadout itself or in upgrade trees for towers, blacksmiths, and barracks. Once those initial 10 levels have been cleared though, that's where the real fun begins. Before starting, a myriad of modifiers can be applied to the game to enhance the difficulty. Harder, better, faster, stronger, as I believe some daft singer was once quoted, with certain combinations awarding 1 of 6 badges to collect for each stage. This, along with a handful of bonus game modes, I don't even have enough of a word count to mention, provide a king's ransom of replayability if Thronefall sinks its hooks as deep into you as they did into me. Thronefall has a very clean and straightforward set of achievements, essentially dividing up the campaign into each stage and their associated 6 quests which require you to win with certain prerequisites. The vast majority of these quests are not too taxing. Usually the A's, B's and C's don't require any deviation from your preferred playstyle, the D's start to ask for some attention from the player, and the E's and F's are where the real difficulty comes in. By far the hardest quests are in the latter stages, Wildbach, Freifort and Totend, where you must score a huge number of points by stacking mutators together to multiply your final score and get it above the set threshold. So first up, we're going to look at Wildbach, where you'll need to score 20,000 points. Here we're choosing the Turtle, Falcon, Wasp, Death, no towers and no units mutators. Our weapon is the bow and dagger, and our perks are Warrior Training, Glass Cannon, Faster Research, Lighter Materials and Relentless Research. Our main strategy here is to enhance our character's damage output as quickly as we can using the pair of barracks to the east, whilst also upgrading our own economy and hiding it behind a pair of walls in order to protect it. So basically what you want to do is you want to put your money straight into these blacksmiths at every opportunity as soon as they're done researching, and then any leftover money you're going to put into the dock at the far west, and then the farms which you can tuck behind this wall here to stop enemies getting straight through. Then you're just going to sit back and keep enemy waves at bay as best you can. Sometimes you are going to lose the closest mill here to enemies as they break through, but just try and protect it as best you can, don't worry too much. If you do lose too much in your economy on any particular night, you can reset. We are not desperately looking for the no retries bonus points at the end, but you can see here you reach a point where every enemy is more or less a one-shot, so you could just blast through every wave. On other nights, you're going to see these big waves of spiders. That's why we've invested in walls, because the damage output of spiders against buildings is incredibly low, so you can just focus your attention on one wave of spiders before turning your attention to the others. You, again, want to protect mills as much as you can if possible, but don't worry about the blacksmiths. That's why we've got relentless research. They can be destroyed and they will still continue researching. So just make sure you're looking after your economy here like I am, and you should have no problems getting through to the last waves. And then you can use the temple in the top right corner to increase your damage threshold even higher and mop up those last couple nights. Moving on to Freifort now, with another 20,000 points to score. Our chosen weapon is the Battle Axe to help us carve through siege weapons, and the perks we're using are Gladiator School, Commander Mode, Melee Damage, Experience Gain, and Pristine Warriors. These will help us tackle the Snake, Falcon, Wasp, Phoenix, and Chaos Mutators. Okay, so after we get our city centre down, we're going to head on over straight away and make sure you summon a big spider on the first wave. This is going to boost our economy massively at the start, which you're definitely going to need. And then the other linchpin of our strategy here is to immediately get some berserkers. All our perks are built around buffing these berserkers to be as hard hitting as possible, so they are going to help you mop up these early waves which are boosted by the Wasp God really nicely. Being aware that the Chaos God is going to cause enemies to be spawning all over the place in a line along towards your city centre, so a lot of what you're going to be doing here is kiting enemies. You are very fragile and do very little damage, especially because your enemies are regaining health. So what you want to be doing is kiting them around and letting the berserkers do all the hard work for you. After that first wave, we can get our economy going, so we're going to put a dock in the northern spot there, and then also going to head across and pick up a mine and fill in the second dock spot as well in the southwestern corner. We're going to be making use of the magic armor, since that's probably going to be our main damage output as a character, and also enhance our berserkers with melee attack buffs. Do be conscious though, we do need to slowly build towards having a sizable ranged force as well, otherwise we are not going to be able to deal with the blimps that come in later on in the stage. Notice how even though the Chaos God perk is making enemies spawn everywhere, you can use these buildings to tactfully break up the enemies, and then they all converge onto expected positions. So you can use that to position your melee units accordingly to defend high ground. There's an opening on, I believe, the fourth night here where you only have to deal with 3 siege engines. So we are going to also use this as an opportunity to take another big spider. Look how I can use this rotating movement to basically not even get hit by the big spider, and then the berserkers can just move in and finish cleaning that up. As we fill out on our economy here, we've also started to pick up longbow archers, which is our main ranged force. Also a couple towers just to help kite enemies. The bottom right hand tower traps enemies as they spawn from the Chaos God. So as you can see here now, we've got a nice support force where the berserkers can jump over the cliffs and assault enemies. The longbow archers can sit at the back, and you're going to see now just how easily these berserkers just carve through all these troops. The added damage to siege engines is great as well, but all these damage buffs stacking together, they're going to do a huge amount of work for you. So just make sure to keep those barracks at the back defended, as that is your main damage output for this run. And you can see now, by the time the blimps are going to start rolling in, we've got upgraded towers so that they can soak damage. Once the blimps do start impacting you, you want to move the berserkers up to the top of the cliff where you are also going to be stationed, just to act as a means to draw the aggro of these blimps so that they're not going to be shooting at either your longbow archers or your precious buildings. as you're leading into the final night, you should have been taking the temple for the previous 2 nights so that you can get the maximum buff here, which I am choosing to use on increasing the respawn rate of your units by something like 275%, so that you can just have an endless tirade of berserkers running in. They are going to keep dying, keep getting that experience gain perk so that they hit harder and harder. Longbow archers just dealing damage where they can at the back. They're not a huge player in the final night. And lots of armoured towers as well, so that they can soak all these rockets from the boss and basically act as a defence for as long as possible. Berserkers are going to be picking off all these lone troops as they spawn out, so don't worry too much about those. Just keep using your special ability whenever you need to try and stay alive and kite as many enemies as you can. And then hopefully that should mean that it isn't anywhere near as much of an issue to hit down this siege boss at the end, although I'm looking at the footage now, there is a lot of enemies that have come out of it, but the respawn rate is so high that we do just keep bashing these enemies back. It really isn't a big deal. The boss is actually going to go down before we clean up all these troops, which is absolutely fine. And yeah, look at these longbows, actually are doing a fair bit of the work here. They are mopping up nicely. Berserkers coming up the rear, none of this is going to be any kind of issue, and that should be all done for you. Finally, we'll be facing down the Evil King in Totend, buffed by the Snake, Wasp, No Towers, Growth, Range, Afterlife, and Choice Mutators. That is a very long list, but the points threshold for Quest F has raised it to 25,000 points now. We're bringing the ever-thirsty Blood Wand, which is going to be carrying us quite effectively, as you'll see shortly, supplemented by the Heavy Armour, Warrior Training, Gladiator School, Glass Cannon, and Lighter Materials perks. So once again, we're going to be making use of these summoning circles, particularly at the start of the run, to generate early game economy and kickstart all our buildings. We're going to be using blacksmiths to buff our character using the Blood Wand, so you're going to be basically only primarily focusing on damage output, as the attack speed is already very high. You want to be using things like these farms around the edge, and yeah, it's not as difficult to run you through this one. The summoning waves tend to rotate between the 3 different avenues on this sort of T-shaped formation. We get to the point here where our Blood Wand's dealing so much damage we can even handle the elite big spider there, and then your armed forces can sort of hold back the initial push from an enemy wave while you come in. And then, yeah, essentially you just want to stand there and let your hero do the hard work. Troops are going to support a little bit, but that's not the focus of this build. And yeah, in case you don't know, for the Blood Wand, you do need to stand still as much as possible, otherwise your attack speed does go down, which is going to actually have a significant impact. Just making sure every time we're separating our melee units from our ranged units. Oh, look at that damage output, that is melting away at particularly siege engines. The siege engines are going to be some of the most problematic units that you're going to have to deal with, so wherever you can, you just want to push right up against them so that you can focus those down instead of worrying about units like the ghosts, which are incredibly slow and you can mop up later. Once you start seeing units coming in from every direction, we are going to adapt our strategy slightly. We're going to plonk our melee units at the front of the barracks there to help protect them. Our ranged units are going to sit right in front of our city centre. You can see now the Blood Wand doing incredible amounts of damage, just melts away each unit. Definitely want to be putting down these trellises, I don't know what to call them actually. They're going to slow down enemies as they try and come up the stairs, which, particularly in this wave, has a massive impact. And then again, you can see we've just got so much damage here that we can just focus down each unit one at a time. Moving on to night 12 now, we're going to get another pair of big spiders, which again, we can just absolutely melt. They're not even going to get to touch any of our units or buildings, so that's easy money. and then heading straight up as soon as we can. Our army's going to hold back these units for as long as possible until we can bolster them, and then yeah, we're pretty much just sat here scooping up all these siege wheels. Blacksmith's fully upgraded at this point, so we're not upset if it gets destroyed. Make a point here of saying that you're not really going to be making use of your special ability because it does damage you and also slows you down significantly, so it tends to put you in an unnecessarily risky position where other enemies that are nearby might just be able to pick you off if you do make use of your special ability. Our auto attack is just so strong that you don't really need to be making use of it. Night 14 now, and this is definitely one which I had to repeat quite a few times to get it right. Essentially, I've got my melee units in the bottom right corner holding back our enemy wave. We've got all our ranged units sat in front of our city centre. We handle the units to the northwest. We have hit the second stage now of our damage boost from the temple, so that is going to be seeing some significant work here as we basically just melt any enemy that gets within 20 meters of us. The thing to balance here is dealing with all these siege weapons because they have significant range and damage buffs, so we don't want to care too much about the spiders. If you can save barracks, great, but the main thing is to focus on these siege engines to make sure that they don't get enough of a foothold to the point where your units just can't even hold their ground anymore. So yeah, it is going to be a bit of a balancing act. You are going to probably get the balance slightly wrong a few times. There is a bit of luck involved here. Final big boss now, and the key here is to mop up any summoned units before you focus down the boss. You can very easily bring down its health, as you can just see there, but if you just melt the boss, then you're actually going to get overrun quite quickly because we're on the 3rd level of the temple now, which reduces your move speed by I think 50%. So you can't move as quickly to each different lane. Once again, melted the boss there. We can finish off all these units pretty fast, so we should be able to catch up without too much trouble. Making sure as well, while you are moving from one lane to another, you're bringing your units with you to help support. Do need to have some awareness as well because of your slow movement speed. If you let yourself get too close to a lot of enemies, particularly ranged units, they can quite easily finish you off. So just make sure to keep your distance. Let your allied units do some of the soaking of this damage. We are just going to keep moving forward though as well to make sure that these siege units can't get too much of a foothold. And again, the boss is just so slow that it's just not even going to get anywhere near our main base before we have a chance to completely melt it. So there we go, that's the first stage done. Unfortunately, it is a bit tricky to focus down on the main boss. The reflection enemies just keep coming in and running straight at you quite often, so you do have to kind of just deal with them and then get back to the boss. But again, our damage buff is so big now that there you go, he's just completely evaporated. And then these reflections don't really have much of a priority in terms of hitting your city centre, so you can just mop them up. Lovely, lovely, lovely. There you go. That is the last achievement for Thronefall, and you should have everything now. So, Thronefall sufficiently tests you in every category. You do have to have different approaches to each different stage in order to succeed. All the different perks, weapons, and mutators offer a very varied experience so that you can get a lot of bang from your buck here, and tackling all these different achievements is plenty enjoyable because of that. You can try a lot of different playstyles, a lot of different techniques, and then you are sufficiently tested by those last few quest Fs. So yeah, very happy with Thronefall, enjoyed it, didn't have to spend too much time on it either, and yeah, it's just a very well put together game. So 5 out of 5. Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the video. If you did enjoy it, please leave some comments or likes or subscribes or whatever buttons you want to press. Hopefully this was useful as either a little review of Thronefall or Spiritfarer, and if you have picked these games up, hopefully these last couple achievements have been not too difficult for you to scoop up. Go ahead and let me know if you want to see other games covered, but we'll leave it there for now, and I'll see you in the next one.